Hi there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. For all you guys out there in the notification squad or the early squad, you might recognize the name Peter Yim because he's usually one of the first people to comment on every one of our videos, and he's also the person who's responsible for the question that is at the core of today's video. Peter asks, which type of weapon can actually pierce Mandalorian Beskar? Now, I don't really know what you're going to do with this information, Peter. I just want to remind everyone that I am not responsible for all your actions, you crazy kids. Also, if you guys want your Star Wars questions answered, please follow us on Facebook and send us a message with your video idea. To understand Beskar's weaknesses, we must first understand its strengths. Mandalorian iron, or Beskar, is only found on the outer rim world of Mandalore and its moon of Concordia. This was an incredibly durable iron ore that was considered indestructible by early Mandalorians. Its unique properties are probably directly tied to the Mandalorians' early military dominance against its neighboring planets. This was an extremely rare metal, which of course makes it very valuable. At the same time, it's a very flexible metal that can be used for a variety of different purposes. You can create plates of Bes'kar iron, or you can create a foam version, a mesh version. You even have micronized particles of Beskar along with transparent Beskar. Of course, this could only be achieved through extremely complicated and difficult to master processes that only Mandalorian metalsmiths knew how to do. These secrets were guarded suspiciously by Mandalorian society and passed down only to the most trusted Mandalorian apprentices. So Beskar was not only strategically and tactically important to the Mandalorian people, it was also very important to their culture. Because of how much money and resources are involved in making a suit of armor, they are usually maintained and passed down to the next generation. Sabian Wren's armor, for instance, was forged 500 years ago, and will probably outlast her for another 500 years. Mandalorian iron has been called indestructible by those who wear it and by those who fight against people wearing it. And it's not just because it's extremely durable, it's also highly energy resistant. This means one could fire a standard blaster round at a plate of Beskar and not even leave much of a mark or even heat up the surface. It's not surprising that pure Beskar is also lightsaber resistant. When Ahsoka Tano ambushes Din Djarin, his wrist gauntlets were more than enough to stave off her pure white blades of intense heat. So Beskar's main advantage as a metal is that it has a very high melting point. This is why it's so difficult to work with, and this is also why it's almost indestructible. Now obviously there are different grades of Beskar armor. You have brand new shiny suits like Din Djarin, which is probably of a higher grade and more pure. But then you have suits of armor like Boba Fett's, which was most likely made of a lower quality grade Beskar that was mixed with other metals. If you take a look closely at his helmet, there's a pretty large dent there, which was caused by Cad Bane in an old-fashioned Western standoff. Bane favors the LL-30, a high-powered blaster pistol with a high rate of fire. It wasn't able to pierce Boba Fett's Beskar, but it was powerful enough to deform the metal and make it cave in. But not even Din Djarin's suit of armor was indestructible. Everything has its limits. When Din Djarin journeys to Tatooine, he faces off against assassin Fennec Shand and her modified MK sniper rifle. The bolts from this blaster were apparently powerful enough to pierce through Din Djarin's suit of armor. Luckily, she was firing from at least a kilometer away, and blaster bolts lose a lot of energy when they travel through the atmosphere. Even so, the resulting shots were more than powerful enough to send Din Djarin flying from its force. This is probably where Beskar has its biggest disadvantage. It's not really good at stopping concussive shock waves that are caused by explosive weapons or just the collision of a projectile. And so I'm sure Din Djarin will have welts all over his body and even broken bones from the impacts that he takes, especially if it's strong enough to lift him off his feet. In Star Wars, there are also what's known as slug throwers, aka traditional firearms. You also have handheld railguns like Verpine shatterguns. Judging by the toughness of high-quality Beskar, most slug thrower, aka bullets, are going to have a hard time penetrating this sheet of metal. But a Verpine shattergun uses magnetic acceleration to fire tiny projectiles at ridiculous speeds. This might be a little more dangerous. It's been effective against one of the toughest armor systems ever developed, the Republic Clone Commando Katarn armor. But that, of course, is very different from Beskar. It depends mainly on deflector shields and many layers of Duraplast. a material that focuses on energy absorption rather than durability. Now, the one weapon we do know for sure that can destroy Beskar is an experimental Mandalorian weapon known as the Arc Pulse Generator. This was an extremely powerful energy weapon that was drawn to Beskar alloys. It would then superheat these alloys to such a high temperature that it would eventually break down the Beskar and vaporize the wearer inside. No one really knows how this super weapon works. It might take advantage of Beskar's molecular structure, or perhaps it just harnesses too much power for the metal to handle. Now, the Arc Pulse Generator is not really a practical field-deployed military weapon. It's just like this large thing that's not very mobile. The Arc Pulse Generator would eventually be destroyed by the rebels, but not before they reconfigured the weapon to target plastoid found in Stormtrooper armor. And so it's very much possible that the Arc Pulse Generator works similar to a disruptor rifle. Disruptor rifles were an extremely dangerous weapon that shot out a violent beam of energy that rips apart an object at the molecular level. It was also capable of vaporizing organic beings in just one hit, and it could even damage the hull of a starship. We almost see what a disruptor can do against Beskar when Din Djarin gets jumped by a group of bounty hunters in pursuit of Baby Yoda. But luckily, Mando Dad disarms him just in time. Now, I admit I don't actually know if that is a disruptor, but clearly these bounty hunters know that Din Djarin is going to be wearing some very thick armor, so they kind of brought their own special weapon. It could, of course, just be a high-powered blaster rifle as well. Now, speaking of high-powered blasters, there's another weapon known as the E-Web Heavy Repeating Blaster. It was responsible for most of the casualties during the Night of 1,000 Tears, which was a massacre of Mandalorian recruits carried out by Imperials in gunships using E-Webs. E-Webs apparently can do enough damage to either pierce or damage Beskar, or perhaps the kinetic energy from an E-Web round is just so intense for an organic being that it cannot withstand the concussive force. It doesn't really matter if the Beskar holds or not. We see that Din Djarin gets wounded from a powerful explosion caused by an E-Web generator, and that seems to do a lot of internal damage to him. So again, Beskar does not seem to do a good job against concussive forces. Which brings us to an interesting conclusion. Anything powerful enough to pierce or damage Beskar will probably also have enough kinetic energy to kill the wearer of the armor. So a Mandalorian in Beskar is only really protected against small arms fire. One could just treat a Mandalorian in full armor as like a lightly armed vehicle, or maybe a small tank. Now, initially Peter Yim asked me what kind of real-life weapons could pierce Beskar. And now that I think about it, we have to really consider the practicality of designing, some kind of munition that was actually able to penetrate one of the densest metal in the galaxy. One, you can just easily use a standard 50 caliber BMG round, which can produce 66,000 newtons of force, enough to cause some serious damage and knock Din Djarin off his feet. I mean, this was a round created for anti-material purposes and designed to stop light vehicles in their track. So I guess it's not that important to figure out how to pierce Beskar. That's exactly probably what the Mandalorians want you to waste time on, because all you really need to knock out a Mandalorian is a good concussion grenade. The guy's basically inside of a metal coffin. So there you have it, guys. That's our analysis of which weapons can defeat an individual wearing Beskar. As you can see, there are a few different ways. Let me know in the comment section below if I've missed any, or you have any personal ways that you like getting around that Beskar. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.